Dear friends, there are moments in life when a single voice, barely above a whisper, can change everything. This story came to me through a retired accountant in Columbus, Ohio, who witnessed something remarkable 3 years ago. It's about the courage to speak when silence would be safer, about seeing the invisible people who keep our world running, and about how the smallest acts of noticing can prevent the greatest disasters. In a time when we're quick to judge by appearances and slow to listen to wisdom from unexpected places, this tale reminds us that truth doesn't care about your title or uniform. Sometimes the person pushing the cleaning cart sees what the executives miss. Sometimes salvation comes from the most humble corner of the room. This is such a story. Miriam Holt's hand froze on the coffee cup she was about to collect. The number on the spreadsheet seemed to pulse on the paper, wrong, in a way that made her stomach tighten. 47 million in consolidated debt. She'd seen this pattern before 15 years ago at Delacorte and Associates, right before the Pemberton scandal broke. "Excuse me," she heard herself say, her voice barely a whisper. Harlan Whitmore's fountain pen stopped moving, hovering an inch above the bankruptcy papers. Lucas Brenner looked up from his leather portfolio, irritation flashing across his face at the interruption from the cleaning woman. "That number," Miriam said, pointing with a trembling finger, "the 47 million. It includes personal debt secured by private assets." The conference room fell silent, except for the distant hum of machinery from the factory floor below. Through the glass windows, she could see the workstations where her husband Nathan's father had spent 40 years, a detail Harlan Whitmore didn't know, couldn't know. "How could you possibly—" Lucas started, then stopped himself. Miriam gripped the handle of her cleaning cart. 3 years of practiced invisibility warring with the CPA license still valid in her dresser drawer at home. Nathan's voice echoed in her memory. "Your gift doesn't die with me, Mary. Ohio statute eotopt." She continued, the numbers crystallizing in her mind with the clarity that had once saved Fortune 500 companies. Personal debt secured by private property cannot be included in Chapter 11 corporate filing. The actual corporate debt is 35 million, not 47. Harlan set down the pen completely, his weathered hands flat on the mahogany table. "Lucas, is this true?" The CFO's face had gone pale, his fingers drumming that nervous rhythm again, the same pattern Miriam had noticed every month when the financial reports came due. She'd cleaned this room after 100 meetings, seen the stress patterns, the telltale signs of numbers being massaged. "It's a simplified presentation," Lucas said carefully. "The board doesn't need to see every technical detail. The board needs to see the truth." Harlan's voice carried an edge Miriam had never heard in 3 years of working here. Eleanor Whitmore chose that moment to walk through the door, travel-worn and unexpected, pulling a small suitcase behind her. She looked exactly like the photos of Margaret on Harlan's desk. If Margaret had lived to see 40. "Am I interrupting something important?" Eleanor asked. But her eyes were already scanning the scene, her father's shocked face, Lucas's defensive posture, and Miriam standing there in her gray uniform with the quiet authority of someone who had just prevented disaster. Before we continue, please leave a like and subscribe. Let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. Lucas's fingers found the edge of the conference table, knuckles white against dark wood. A bead of sweat tracked down his temple, disappearing into his collar. "Treatable," he said, the word scraping past his throat. 90% survival rate with proper care. I had everything lined up. Insurance, savings, home equity." Miriam noticed the tremor in his left hand, subtle, but persistent. The same tremor she'd seen in Nathan's hands when the first symptoms started. Then Lehman collapsed. Lucas stared at a water ring on the table. Insurance company folded overnight. Savings account frozen. House worth less than the mortgage. Harlan shifted forward in his chair, leather creaking. Your son Janet's parents paid? Lucas's voice dropped to barely audible. Sold their retirement condo in Florida. Moved into a trailer to save my son while I sat in my home office, building spreadsheets, trying to restructure our way out. The factory floor vibrated through the building, a rhythmic pulse Miriam felt through her worn shoes. Second shift starting, 200 families, depending on whatever happened in this room. She didn't leave because we were poor. Lucas continued. His right eye twitched a detail Miriam had noticed during quarterly reports, but never understood until now. She left because I disappeared into the numbers. 18-hour days trying to control what couldn't be controlled. Eleanor set her suitcase upright, the wheels clicking against the floor. When did you last see them? 5 years, 2 months, 16 days? The precision of it made Miriam's chest tighten. She knew that kind of counting, had done it herself. 3 years, 4 months, 8 days since Nathan's diagnosis, 1 year, 2 months, 5 days since his last word. Cole Travis cleared his throat. Lucas, the Morrison contract, you've been hiding it to force bankruptcy, to protect Harlan's personal assets. The house Margaret loved, Lucas's eyes fixed on a Harlan, the cabin where Eleanor learned to fish, your father's tool collection. All of it would be safe in corporate bankruptcy. Walter Morrison pulled out a chair. Wood scraping against floor, but killing the company to save the man? No, Rebecca Sterling spoke from the doorway. Holding a manila folder, Miriam recognized the confidential employee medical fund records. Not killing it, putting it in stasis. Lucas has subsidiary companies ready to buy the assets post-bankruptcy, shell organizations he's been building for 3 years. The air conditioning clicked on, flooding the room with recycled air that smelled faintly of machine oil. Miriam saw it then. The full picture crystallizing like numbers aligning in a perfect equation. Mr. Brenner, who actually owns those shell companies. Lucas's tremor spread to both hands. Lucas's throat worked. No sound coming. The fluorescent light above flickered, casting shadows that shifted across his face. The employees? He whispered. Harlan's chair scraped backward. What? The shell companies? Lucas's words came faster now, like water through a cracked dam, structured as employee ownership trusts. Every worker who's been here more than 2 years is listed as beneficiary. Rebecca Sterling dropped the manila folder. Papers scattered across the floor. Medical claims, payment records, dates and names Miriam recognized, Jim Paulson's wife's chemotherapy, the Henderson's daughter's autism therapy. All paid from a fund nobody knew existed. You built a backup plan to give the company to the workers. Eleanor's voice cut through the room. Lucas pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, dabbed at the sweat beading on his forehead. The cloth came away damp. Not give, protect. If Whitmore Industries failed, the assets would transfer at market value to the trusts. The workers would own the means of production. They could restart, reorganize, survive. The factory hum below shifted pitch, a machine cycling down. Miriam knew that sound. The old Heidelberg press that Nathan's father had operated for 30 years. It needed adjustment every shift change, a quirk nobody had fixed because the old-timers knew how to compensate. How long? Harlan's question came out rough. 3 years? Since Margaret's diagnosis. Lucas's eye twitch intensified. She came to my office, sat in the green chair, the one she needle-pointed the cushion for, said she knew about my son, about Janet, said I was trying to control the uncontrollable. Cole Travis bent to gather the scattered papers. His hands shook slightly. Miriam noticed the tremor wasn't fear, but recognition. The overtime authorizations, the equipment purchases routed through subsidiaries. You were building redundancy. Every decision. Lucas opened his portfolio, revealing spreadsheets covered in handwritten notes, margins filled with calculations, documented, legal, transparent if anyone looked. But nobody looks at the whole picture. Miriam stepped away from her cart. Her orthopedic shoes squeaked on the polished floor. Except someone did look. Everyone turned to her. She reached into her uniform pocket, pulled out a small notebook, the kind Nathan used for his physics equations. 3 years of observations, financial patterns visible from the ground floor, delivery schedules that didn't match production reports, maintenance budgets that disappeared into subsidiary accounts. You knew. Harlan's voice cracked. I suspected. Miriam opened the notebook. Her handwriting, cramped but precise, filled every page. The same week I started here, Mr. Brenner restructured the pension fund, created a firewall between corporate assets and employee retirement. It was elegant, protective, the kind of thing someone does when they've watched retirement savings evaporate. Walter Morrison leaned forward, his wedding ring clicking against the table. Why didn't you say anything? Because I was watching him build a safety net. Miriam turned a page. Every month, another strand, employee health fund, education assistance program, emergency family leave pool, all hidden in subsidiary structures, protected from corporate liability. Eleanor picked up one of the scattered papers. This is dated 2 weeks before Mom died. Rebecca Sterling nodded. Margaret insisted. Said the employees needed protection more than the family needed wealth. The air conditioning cycled off. In the sudden quiet, they could hear the parking lot car doors slamming. Second shift fully arrived, unaware their futures were being dissected in the conference room above. Lucas stood abruptly. His chair rolled backward, hit the wall. None of this matters. If we can't make the loan payment tomorrow, how much? Grant Fisher, the lawyer, had been silent until now, taking notes in his legal pad. $4 million. Lucas pulled another document from his portfolio. Due at noon. Miss it. The bank calls everything. 47 million or 35 million doesn't matter. We don't have 4. Miriam felt the notebook's weight in her hand. 3 years of observations. 3 years of watching Lucas build his protective maze. 3 years of staying silent while the company bled. Actually, she said, her voice steady despite the hammering in her chest, we might. She walked out to the window overlooking the factory floor. The old Heidelberg press was cycling up again, its rhythm familiar as a heartbeat. Nathan's father had operated that machine. Saved every penny. Invested carefully. Never mentioned the patents he'd filed on his lunch breaks. Improving processes. Solving problems. Mr. Whitmore, she said without turning, have you ever wondered why your grandfather sponsored my father-in-law's immigration in 19? The question hung in the air. Behind her. She heard Harlan's sharp intake of breath. The patents, Eleanor said suddenly. Mom mentioned patents in her journal. Miriam turned from the window. In her notebook, pressed between pages of financial observations, was a folded document she'd carried for a year. Nathan's final gift. 17 industrial process patents, she said. Filed by Nathan Holt, high school physics teacher, son of Jonas Holt, tool and die specialist, employee number 007 at Whitmore Industries. She unfolded the document. The letterhead was from a law firm in Chicago. Current valuation. Her voice remained steady. $30 million. Lucas sat down hard, his chair spinning slightly. Nathan was your husband, is... The present tense came automatically. Nathan is my husband. Death doesn't change that. Grant Fisher stood, legal pad forgotten. Those patents, if they're valid, if you have clear ownership, we need $4 million by noon tomorrow. Miriam refolded the document. The patents are collateral, but there's a condition. Harlan's fountain pen rolled off the table, hit the floor with a crack that sounded like break bone. What condition? He asked. Miriam looked directly at Lucas. Mr. Brenner stays, not as CFO, something else. Because a man who builds secret safety nets for people who don't even know they need them, that's not a man you fire. The Heidelberg press below stopped mid-cycle. The silence was complete. Then Cole Travis laughed, sharp, bitter. You don't know what else Lucas has been hiding. Cole Travis pulled a flash drive from his pocket, black plastic catching the fluorescent light. Everything's on here. 3 years of parallel books. Lucas's face drained of color. The tendons in his neck stood out like cables. Parallel books. Harlan's voice dropped to a whisper. Cole inserted the drive into the conference room laptop. The projector hummed to life, throwing columns of numbers onto the white wall. One set for the board, one set for the employees, one set for the IRS, all legal, all technically accurate, all telling different stories. Miriam moved closer to the projection. The numbers swam into focus. She recognized the pattern immediately. Strategic opacity, each view designed to show exactly what the audience needed to see, nothing more. This is from last quarter. Cole clicked through spreadsheets. Board sees steady 15% decline. Employees see stable operations with minor adjustments. IRS sees minimal profit, requiring no additional tax burden. All true. Grant Fisher stood directly in front of the projection, light playing across his face. All true from specific angles. Cole's jaw worked, like photographing a building. Front shows beautiful facade, back shows crumbling foundation, both real, neither complete. Rebecca Sterling picked up another scattered paper from the floor. Her reading glasses reflected the projected numbers. The Henderson family. Lucas. You paid their mortgage for 6 months. Through the subsidiary. Lucas's left hand found his tie, loosened it, structured as advance on future profit sharing that doesn't exist yet. The Paulson wedding. Rebecca held up another paper. Their daughter. You paid for the entire reception. Equipment rental company we own needed to show revenue. Yet Lucas's words came out mechanical. Real service, real payment, just circular routing. Eleanor stepped between Lucas and the projection, her shadow breaking the numbers into fragments. You've been running the entire company as a welfare system? No. Lucas stood, his knee hitting the table. Coffee cups rattled. I've been preventing 2008 from happening again. To any of them. The Heidelberg press started up below. Its rhythm irregular now. Someone was trying to adjust it without knowing the trick. Third lever, half pull. Wait for the click. Miriam watched Lucas's hands. The tremor was gone, replaced by something else. Purpose. The same steadiness she'd seen in Nathan's hands when he was teaching, even after the diagnosis. Your son, she said. How old was he when he got sick? 7. The word came out raw. Same age as Benny Henderson when his father got laid off from Ford. Same age as Marcus Washington, whose mother works third shift assembly. Walter Morrison's chair creaked as he shifted his weight. You're protecting children. I'm protecting Everyone. Lucas moved to the window, palm flat against the glass. Do you know what it's like to watch your son ask why he has to leave the hospital when he's not better yet, to explain that money determines who lives? Harlan's fountain pen lay broken on the floor, ink spreading in a slow pool. The Brenner Foundation. Eleanor's voice was sharp. Mom's journal mentioned it. She was on the board. Lucas turned from the window. Margaret knew everything, helped structure it, said guilt was useless unless converted to action. The foundation owns the shell companies, Grant Fisher said, understanding spreading across his face. The employee trusts are beneficiaries of the foundation. You built a perpetual support system. Cole clicked to another screen. Except it's bleeding us dry. Every month, more families need help, more medical bills, more education costs, more emergencies. So you were forcing bankruptcy to trigger the trust transfer. Harlan's voice was hollow. Give the company to the employees before it collapsed under the weight of supporting them. Clean break. Lucas returned to his chair. They'd own the assets. Restart without debt, without me? Miriam felt the notebook in her pocket, Nathan's equations pressing against her ribs. Except you forgot one thing. Everyone turned to her. She walked to the projection, pointed to a line item everyone had missed. Transportation costs, listed under maintenance. But the amount matches exactly what it costs to run a private ambulance service. Lucas's eye twitched again. You've been running medical transport for employees' families. Miriam traced the number with her finger. Free, disguised as equipment maintenance. How did you? Because my husband used it. The words scraped her throat. 3 times a week for dialysis the last month. I thought it was the hospital service. The driver always said it was covered. I never questioned it. The room went still. Even the factory noise seemed to fade. You knew who I was, Miriam faced Lucas. When I applied 3 years ago, you knew I was Nathan's wife. Lucas nodded slowly. You hired me because of the patents. No. Lucas's voice was firm. I hired you because Margaret asked me to. Said you needed purpose while Nathan was dying. Said cleaning gave you time to think, to process. Eleanor dropped into a chair. Mom orchestrated all of this. She saw the connections. Lucas pulled out a leather journal, similar to Harlan's, but worn at the edges. Every employee, every family, every connection, going back 70 years. She knew your father-in-law. Miriam knew about the patents, knew about his father's loyalty to the company. Miriam opened her notebook again. Pressed between pages was a photo, Nathan in his wheelchair, last Christmas. Wearing a Whitmore Industries cap someone had given him. Who gave him the cap? She asked. Margaret. Lucas's voice broke. She visited him every Tuesday when you were at work, brought him physics journals, discussed entropy and systems theory. The air conditioning kicked on again, rustling the papers on the table, the sound like wind through leaves, like breath through dying lungs. She knew she was dying, Lucas continued. Wanted to ensure everyone was positioned correctly for after. Harlan stood so fast his chair crashed backward. My wife was playing chess with all our lives. She was building a bridge, Rebecca Sterling's voice was soft, between what was and what needed to be. Grant Fisher cleared his throat. The loan payment, $4 million by noon tomorrow. The patents won't work. A new voice from the doorway. Harrison York of Corbin Capital stood there, silver hair perfect despite the late hour. I've been listening. The patents are encumbered. Miriam's hand found the wall for support. Nathan Holt signed them over to someone else. York continued, stepping into the room. 3 days before he died. I should know. I have the originals. The Heidelberg press below went silent. The entire factory floor stopped, as if the building itself was holding its breath. York reached into his briefcase, pulled out a manila envelope. "The question is," he said, looking directly at Miriam, "do you know who your husband gave $30 million worth of patents to?" York's fingers drummed against the manila envelope. The sound filled the conference room, hollow, rhythmic, like dirt hitting a coffin lid. Miriam's throat constricted. 3 days before Nathan died. 3 days when he couldn't speak, couldn't write, could barely keep his eyes open. The morphine drip had been constant by then, the hospice nurse checking every 4 hours. "That's impossible." Her voice came out strangled. "He was non-responsive." Tuesday, March 15th. York pulled out a document, legal-sized, covered in stamps and seals, 3:47 p. witnessed by 2 nurses and a notary. The paper trembled in the air between them. Miriam saw Nathan's signature, shaky but unmistakable. The same signature from their mortgage papers, their wedding certificate, 40 years of shared documents. Who? Harlan's question cut through the room. York's smile was thin. James Brenner. Lucas's knees buckled. His hand missed the table edge, and he went down hard, knee cracking against the floor. Cole moved toward him, stopped, uncertain. "My son." Lucas's voice was airless. "Your son." York set the document on the table. Nathan Holt assigned all 17 patents to James Brenner, age 30, resident of Minneapolis. The filing was processed through my firm to ensure legal standing. Miriam grabbed the document. The text swam, but she forced her eyes to focus. Transfer of intellectual property, irrevocable assignment, and at the bottom, a handwritten note in Nathan's cramped script. For the son who needed saving. Nathan never met James. Lucas pulled himself up using the table edge, his suit jacket askew. How did he even know? "Margaret!" Eleanor's voice was flat. "Mom connected them." Rebecca Sterling pulled another folder from her stack. Miriam recognized it now, the confidential medical fund records. James Brenner, leukemia treatment, 2008 through 2010. Anonymous benefactor covered 90% of costs. "My father sold his house," Lucas said. "He paid—" "Your father sold his house for $40,000. Rebecca showed him the paper. "James's treatment cost $400,000. The difference came from an anonymous trust." Miriam's legs wouldn't hold her. She sank into the nearest chair, the leather cold through her uniform. Nathan's retirement account. He cashed it out in 2008. Said it was for a sure investment. The air conditioning cycled off. In the silence, they could hear footsteps on the factory floor below, someone running, then another set, then voices, urgent but indistinct. Grant Fisher picked up the patent transfer document, scanning with lawyer's eyes. "This is ironclad. James Brenner owns patents worth $30 million. But there's a condition clause." "What condition?" Harlan's question came out rough. "The patents can only be used for medical expenses and employee welfare programs." Grant adjusted his glasses, read further. "Any profit must be distributed according to a formula Nathan embedded in the transfer." Eleanor moved to the laptop, pulled up her phone calculator. "What formula?" Grant traced the text with his finger. "It's not mathematical. It's physics. Something about entropy and energy conservation." Miriam stood, her muscles protesting. She knew that formula. Nathan had written it on the napkins. Mirrors, windows, anywhere his mind needed to work through the problem. Energy in equals, energy out, adjusted for system efficiency. So she spoke from memory. Every dollar generated must either maintain the system or expand it. No extraction for profit. He built a perpetual motion machine for charity? Cole said, understanding dawning on his face. York laughed, sharp, bitter. Except James Brenner doesn't know he owns any of this? Lucas's head snapped up. What? I've been trying to reach him for a year. York pulled out more papers. Returned letters, disconnected phones. His last known address was Minneapolis. But he moved. His mother won't say where. Janet won't talk to you about James. Lucas's voice cracked. Janet won't talk to anyone about James. York's expression shifted, something almost human crossing his face. Because James attempted suicide 6 months ago. He's been in psychiatric care since. The broken fountain pen on the floor continued its slow leak. Ink spreading like blood across marble. Lucas grabbed the table edge again, knuckles white. No, James is strong. He survived cancer. He's 30 years old with survivor's guilt and abandonment trauma. York's voice lost its corporate polish. His therapist, who I'm not supposed to know about, says he fixates on the cost of his survival, $400,000, the exact amount his father couldn't provide. Miriam felt the notebook in her pocket, Nathan's observations about connection and consequence. He'd known. Somehow, Nathan had known about James's pain. We need those patents, Harlan said quietly. Without them, we lose everything tomorrow. Then you need James's signature. York straightened his tie. Which means Lucas needs to find his son. The factory floor erupted in noise machines, shutting down in sequence. The night shift stopping work. Emergency brake. Miriam couldn't tell from here. Eleanor pulled out her phone. I might be able to help. Everyone turned to her. Mom's oncologist, to Mitchell. She mentioned once that she had a patient who reminded her of Mom Young Man, survived childhood cancer, dealing with aftermath. Said he was in a facility in Cleveland. Cleveland's 2 hours away, Lucas said, already moving toward the door. It's 10 p.m. Grant pointed out, the bank needs payment by noon. Even if you find James, I'll find him. Lucas's voice carried certainty Miriam hadn't heard before. He's my son. The son you haven't seen in 5 years. Cole's words were harsh but not cruel. What makes you think he'll even talk to you? Lucas stopped at the door. His reflection in the glass showed a man stripped of pretense, suit wrinkled, hair disheveled, face raw with pain. Because I finally have something to tell him besides, I'm sorry. He turned back to face them. I can tell him his survival meant something. That Nathan Holt, a man he never met, believed his life was worth saving, worth everything. Rebecca Sterling stood, gathering papers. I'm coming with you. I have medical power of attorney forms if needed. So am I. Eleanor grabbed her suitcase. Mom would want me to. Walter Morrison pulled out car keys. I'll drive. My Lincoln's outside. One by one, they stood Grant with his legal pad, Cole with his laptop, even York with his briefcase. The boardroom emptied except for Harlan and Miriam. You're not coming, Harlan asked her. Miriam walked to the window again. The factory floor was fully stopped now, workers gathering in clusters, looking up at the conference room. Jim Paulson was pointing, saying something to the others. Someone needs to tell them. She pressed her palm against the glass, feeling its coolness. They deserve to know their futures are being decided. What do we tell them? The truth. Miriam turned from the window. That Lucas Brenner spent 3 years building them lifeboats. That Nathan spent his last conscious act securing their future. That Margaret orchestrated all of it from her deathbed. Harlan picked up his broken fountain pen, ink staining his fingers. And if James won't sign, then we know the truth anyway. Miriam headed for the door. Sometimes that's enough. The elevator dinged in the hallway, the others leaving for Cleveland. Miriam took the stairs down to the factory floor, each step echoing in the stairwell. She could hear the workers' voices growing louder as she descended. At the bottom of the stairs, she stopped. Through the small window in the door, she could see them all. 200 faces turned toward her approach. Jim Paulson stood at the front, the Hendersons beside him, the night shift supervisor holding a clipboard. Her hand found the door handle. Behind her, she heard Harlan's footsteps on the stairs, following her down. "Mrs. Holt," Jim Paulson called through the door. "Rebecca Sterlings had sent a text to my wife. Said the company's in trouble, but you found something. That true?" Miriam pushed open the door. The factory floor smelled of machine oil and metal shavings, sweat and coffee, the smell of work, of lives being lived. "It's true," she said, stepping into the crowd. "All of it's true." And behind her, she heard car engines starting in the parking lot, the convoy heading to Cleveland, racing against time. "But there's something else," she continued, reaching into her pocket. Her fingers found not the notebook, but something else. A folded paper she'd forgotten was there. She pulled it out. Another of Nathan's documents. This one dated the day before he died. The letterhead made her stomach drop. "Last will and testament of Nathan Holt." The will trembled in Miriam's hands. Nathan's signature at the bottom. Shaky, but deliberate. Witnessed by Margaret Whitmore and Dr. Sarah Mitchell. Dated March 14th. One day before the patent transfer. "What's it say?" Jim Paulson's voice carried across the factory floor. Miriam's throat constricted. The paper felt wrong, too heavy, like it contained more than words. She unfolded it completely. Nathan's handwriting filled the margins, equations and notes spiraling around the legal text. "To the workers of Whitmore Industries," she read aloud, her voice echoing off the machinery. "Who built the tools that built America?" The crowd pressed closer. Someone killed the overhead fans. The silence was complete, except for the tick of cooling metal. "I, Nathan Holt, son of Jonas Holt, employee number 007, leave the following." Miriam's voice caught. She forced herself to continue. "First, to my wife Miriam, I leave my apologies. She deserved a husband who could give her children wealth, time. Instead, she got me broken body, stubborn mind, and 40 years of love that I could never adequately express." Her knees wanted to buckle. Harlan's hand found her elbow. "Steady. Second, to Lucas Brenner, whom I've never met, but whose story I know I leave forgiveness. Not mine to give, perhaps, but given nonetheless. The money you couldn't raise saved my life in ways you couldn't imagine. Your failure became my foundation." Across the floor, phones began buzzing, texts from those racing to Cleveland. Miriam ignored them. "Third, to Harlan Whitmore, I leave the truth about your grandfather." She looked up at Harlan. His face had gone pale. "In 1951, Harry Whitmore didn't sponsor my father's immigration out of kindness. He did it from obligation. My father, Jonas Holt, had saved Harry's life in France, 1944, pulled him from a burning tank, never asked for anything except a chance to work. Harry gave him that chance and a number 007 because my father loved James Bond novels." The Henderson boy tugged his mother's sleeve. "Mom, that's like the movies." "Shh," Mrs. Henderson whispered, but her eyes were wet. Miriam continued reading. "Fourth, to the workers past, present, and future, I leave a confession. The patents everyone's discussing aren't innovations. They're observations. 40 years of watching you work, solve problems, improve processes. I simply wrote down what you created. The patents belong to James Brenner legally, but morally, they're yours." Jim Paulson's weathered hands clenched and unclenched. "He was documenting us every improvement," Miriam read. "Every shortcut Jim Paulson developed for the Heidelberg press, every efficiency Maria Santos created in assembly, every safety modification David Chen insisted on, all of it. 17 patents representing 200 minds solving problems together." Her phone vibrated a text from Eleanor. "Found James? He won't see Lucas?" Miriam's chest tightened. Without James's signature, everything collapsed. She forced herself to keep reading. "Finally, I leave instructions. If you're reading this, the company is in crisis. Margaret Whitmore predicted it. We spent hours discussing probability while our spouses thought we were discussing poetry. The solution exists, but it requires something harder than money. It requires admission." The factory floor lights flickered, the old electrical system struggling with the load. Half the workers pulled out phone flashlights without being asked, creating pools of white light. Admission of what Miriam read Nathan's words, that we're all connected, that Harlan's grandfather's debt to my father extends to every life in this building, that Lucas's trauma is our trauma, that Margaret's death is our loss, that my patents are your inventions, that isolation is an illusion we maintain because connection requires vulnerability. Harlan's phone rang. He answered, listened, his face changing. Lucas found James, but James locked himself in his room. Says he won't be responsible for anyone else's salvation. The workers stirred, voices rising, some angry, some afraid. The Hendersons held their children closer. Maria Santos crossed herself. "There's more," Miriam said, raising her voice. The crowd quieted. "If James refuses, and he might, the boy carries weight. He shouldn't. There's an alternative. Hidden in my workshop, behind the false panel my wife doesn't know about." Miriam stopped. Nathan's workshop, in their garage, locked since his death, is a prototype, patent number 18, never filed. The one invention that was actually mine. Margaret called it elegant. I called it necessary. Harlan's phone buzzed again. "Eleanor says James is threatening to destroy the patent documents. Says he'd rather burn them than carry the responsibility." "We need that prototype," Jim Paulson said. "Whatever it is," Miriam folded the will. "It's at my apartment, 20 minutes away." "I'll drive you." Jim headed for the door. "My truck's outside." "Wait." Maria Santos stepped forward. "What if it's not there? What if there's no prototype? Then we're exactly where we started," Miriam said, facing truth without protection. Her phone rang. Lucas calling. She answered. "Put it on speaker." "Miriam?" His voice was raw. "James won't see me, won't talk. The nurses say he's been like this for days. But he asked," Lucas's voice broke, "he asked if the janitor was there, the one his therapist mentioned, the one who cleaned his father's office." Miriam's breath stopped. "He knows about me." "The therapist has been telling him about you, about choosing love over career, but about Nathan. James has been fixated on your story for months. Says if someone could give up everything for love." Maybe his father's abandonment wasn't about him being unworthy. The factory floor was silent, 200 people holding their breath. "Put him on," Miriam said. "He won't take the phone." "But he can hear you. You're on speaker." Miriam closed her eyes, felt Nathan's will against her chest, remembered James Brenner at 7, dying of cancer while his father calculated impossible numbers. "James," she said, Your father didn't abandon you because you were unworthy. He abandoned you because he was broken. There's a difference. Silence from Cleveland. Then faintly, how do you know? Because my husband spent his last conscious act giving you $30 million in patents. A man you never met believed you deserved to survive. Not just survive, thrive. I don't want that responsibility. It's not responsibility. Miriam opened her eyes, looked at the workers surrounding her. It's connection. Those patents came from these workers. Your signature gives them back. Circle complete. A long pause. Then, the janitor, you really gave up your career. I gave up nothing. I chose love. Different thing entirely. Another pause. She could hear breathing. Multiple people. If I sign, James's voice was clearer now, closer to the phone. People will depend on me. No, Miriam's voice was firm. People will depend on each other. You're just the legal mechanism. The real work, the human work that's already being done. By who? Miriam looked around the factory floor. By Jim Paulson, who's been mentoring kids for 20 years. By Maria Santos, who organizes meal trains for sick families. By your father, who's been building safety nets he'll never get credit for. By Margaret Whitmore, who orchestrated this entire moment from her deathbed. By my husband, who turned his dying into gift. The sound of paper rustling through the phone. These patents, they're really worth $30 million. They're worth whatever we make them worth. Silence. Then the sound of pen on paper. James is signing. Eleanor's voice cut through. Oh, God, he's actually signing. The factory floor erupted, workers hugging, crying, shouting. Jim Paulson lifted Miriam off her feet, swung her around. The Hendersons were sobbing. Maria Santos was praying in Spanish. But Miriam heard something else through the phone. James Brenner crying. The sound of a 30-year-old man finally releasing weight he'd carried since childhood. Wait, Grant Fisher's voice through the speaker. There's a problem. The notary. We need a notary at 11 p.m. in a psychiatric facility. The celebration stopped. The clock on the factory wall showed 11:07. I'm a notary, someone said from the back of the crowd. Everyone turned. Agnes Chen, the previous janitor, 82 years old, stood in the doorway with her walker. Called me about the commotion, she said. Still have my seal. Never expired it. Force of habit. Agnes, you're 2 hours from Cleveland, Harlan said. No, Agnes smiled. But my granddaughter works at Cleveland Psychiatric, night shift nurse. Has my seal in her locker. I taught her to always be prepared. Miriam's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Dr. Mitchell, watching from parking lot. Have medical documentation ready. March 15th was a lucid day. Can testify to Nathan's mental capacity. The pieces were falling into place, but something nagged at Miriam. The prototype Nathan mentioned. Jim, she said urgently, we still need to get to my apartment. The prototype. What prototype? Harlan asked. She looked at the will again. Nathan's margin notes, the equations. Then she saw it, not math, but chemistry. A formula she recognized. Oh, God! The paper slipped from her fingers. It's not a machine. It's a compound. Miriam bent to retrieve the will. The chemical formula in Nathan's margin notes seemed to pulse on the page C21H23NO5. She knew that molecular structure, had seen Nathan writing it on napkins for months before his diagnosis. It's morphine, she said, a synthetic variant. Pain medication. Harlan's voice was strained. Why would that be? His words cut off. His hand went to his chest, fingers splaying across his shirt. The color drained from his face like water from a basin. Harlan. Jim Paulson stepped forward. Harlan's knees buckled. His shoulder hit the Heidelberg press on the way down, the metal ringing like a bell. His body crumpled onto the concrete floor, fountain pen falling from his jacket pocket, rolling away. Call 911. Maria Santos was already pulling out her phone. Miriam dropped beside Harlan, his pulse hammered under her fingers, rapid, irregular. His breathing came in short gasps. Not a heart attack, panic. The same collapse she'd seen in Nathan when the diagnosis came. "Harlan, look at me." She kept her voice steady. "Count with me. 1, 2, 3. His eyes rolled, unfocused. Sweat beaded across his forehead, soaking into his white hair. Agnes' chin shuffled forward with her walker, reaching into her purse. "Nitroglycerin? Under his tongue? You carry nitro?" Jim asked. "Carry everything." Agnes pressed the small tablet between Harlan's lips. "Learned from 50 years of emergencies." Miriam's phone rang. "Eleanor, Dad just called." Eleanor's voice was tight. "Said his chest hurt, then the line went dead." "He's here. He collapsed. We've called paramedics." "Collapsed? Through the phone?" Miriam heard Lucas say something sharp. "We're coming back. James signed. Agnes's granddaughter notarized. We have the documents. The bank needs them by noon." "Lucas says he'll handle it. Says to read the compound notes. All of them." The line went dead. Around her. Workers formed a protective circle. Blocking the wind from the loading dock, someone had opened for the ambulance. Miriam looked at Nathan's notes again. The morphine formula was just the beginning. Below it, more chemistry, but also physics equations, energy transfer rates, absorption coefficients. "It's not just morphine," she said aloud. "It's a delivery system." Harlan's breathing steadied slightly. The nitro was working. His eyes found hers, focused now but frightened. "Margaret," he whispered. "She took something. The last week. Said it was experimental. Said Nathan developed it." The ambulance siren wailed closer. Red lights flashed through the windows, painting the factory floor in alternating light and shadow. A targeted pain medication, Miriam understood suddenly. That's why Nathan was writing those equations? Not for the patents? For Margaret. He was trying to reduce her suffering without the mental fog. Agnes pulled out another paper from her purse. How much did she carry? And handed it to Miriam. "Found this in your old desk when I took over. Never knew what to do with it." A letter in Margaret's handwriting. "To whoever finds this after the compound works, 7 days of clarity instead of morphine haze, 7 days to say goodbye properly." Nathan refused payment. Said knowledge should be free, but Whitmore Industries could manufacture this, could help thousands die with dignity instead of drugged confusion. "I'm leaving the formula with him. He'll know when to reveal it." Paramedics burst through the loading dock doors, wheeling a gurney. They surrounded Harlan, checking vitals, asking questions. Miriam stepped back, still holding both letters. 70-year-old male, the lead paramedic said into his radio. "Cardiac event stabilized with nitro. Transport to Cleveland General." "I'm riding with him," Jim Paulson said. "Family only." "I'm his brother." Jim lied without hesitation. "Half-brother, different mothers." The paramedic looked skeptical but nodded. They lifted Harlan onto the gurney. As they wheeled him past, he grabbed Miriam's wrist. "The compound," he gasped. "Nathan's workshop. You have to—" "I know." She squeezed his hand. "I'll find it." They loaded him into the ambulance. The siren wailed as it pulled away, leaving the factory floor in sudden quiet. "Mrs. Holt?" Maria Santos touched her shoulder. "It's 11:47. The bank. Lucas will handle the bank." Miriam folded both letters carefully. "I need to get to Nathan's workshop. I'll drive, offered David Chen, Agnes's grandson. When had he arrived? Grandma called me when she heard about the commotion. The crowd parted as they headed for the door, but before they reached it, Miriam's phone rang. Unknown number. Mrs. Holt. The voice was young, male, hesitant. "This is James Brenner." Miriam stopped walking. "James, my father Lucas. He's on the roof." The words hit like cold water. "What of the hospital?" "He signed the papers to the lawyer, then went up to the roof. Security's following him. He's just standing there at the edge. Standing, or it's just standing, it's staring down. He's been there 5 minutes. Won't respond to anyone." Miriam closed her eyes. She knew this paralysis, the moment when the adrenaline of crisis fades and the weight of everything crashes down. "Can you get to him?" "Security won't let me. I'm a patient. But Mom's here. Janet. She's going up." Janet, who hadn't spoken to Lucas in 5 years. "James, listen to me." Miriam opened her eyes. "Your father isn't suicidal. He's stuck. Happens when someone runs on pure purpose, then suddenly stops. The body doesn't know what to do." "How do you know?" "Because I stood on a bridge for 3 hours the day after Nathan's funeral, not planning to jump, just unable to move." Silence. "Then what made you move?" "A stranger asked me for the time." Such a simple question reminded me the world was still spinning. Through the phone, she heard elevator doors, footsteps, Janet's voice saying Lucas's name. "She's with him," James reported. She's taken his hand." Miriam waited. The factory floor was silent around her, everyone listening. "He's stepping back," James said. "He's—" The line went dead. Miriam immediately called Eleanor. No answer. Called Grant Fisher. Straight to voicemail. "We need to go," David Chen said urgently. "It's 11:52. They ran for his car. As they pulled out of the parking lot, Miriam saw something that made her stomach drop. Harrison York's silver Mercedes. Following them? "We have company," David said, checking his mirror. "I know." Miriam gripped Nathan's will. "He wants the compound formula. The morphine variant, worth billions to the right pharmaceutical company." Miriam watched York's headlights maintain perfect following distance. "A pain medication that preserves consciousness. Every hospice in America would want it." David took a hard right, tires squealing. York followed. "Mrs. Holt," David said quietly, "what if the compound isn't in the workshop?" "It has to be." "But what if Nathan was wrong? What if the secret panel is empty?" Miriam looked at the chemical formula again. Then she saw it, not in the formula itself, but in Nathan's note beside it. A single word she'd missed before: kitchen. The kitchen, not Nathan's workshop in the garage. The kitchen where he'd spent his last mobile days, adjusting recipes when his hands could still hold measuring spoons. Change of plans. Miriam pointed left. "Take Riverside Drive." David yanked the wheel. The Honda's tires protested. Rubber leaving marks on asphalt. York's Mercedes smoothly followed, maintaining its predatory distance. "Kitchen's closer than the garage," Miriam explained. "Nathan cooked until 2 weeks before." Her throat closed on the words. The dashboard clock read 11:54. 8 minutes until midnight. 12 hours until the bank deadline. David ran a red light. York stopped, waited 3 seconds, followed, law-abiding even in pursuit. "Why does York want the formula?" David asked, downshifting around a corner. Same reason every pharmaceutical company would. Miriam gripped the door handle as they swerved. "Morphine without mental fog. Billions in profit." Her phone buzzed. Text from Eleanor. "Dad stable. Lucas okay sedato. Janet with him." Then another. "Bank documents filed electronically." 11:55 p.m. We made it. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by new fear. The patents were transferred, but the compound, if York got it first. Here! David pulled into her apartment complex, tires chirping. Miriam was out before the car fully stopped. Her orthopedic shoes slapped against wet pavement. When had it started raining? She fumbled for keys, hands shaking. York's Mercedes pulled in behind them, headlights illuminating the building entrance like stage lights. "Mrs. Holt?" York's voice carried across the parking lot. "We should discuss terms." "No terms." She got the door open, David right behind her. They took the stairs, 2 at a time. 3rd floor, her calves burned. Behind them, York's measured footsteps unhurried, inevitable. Apartment 3, the key stuck. Always did when humidity was high. She wiggled it, the way Nathan had taught her. The lock clicked. The apartment smelled wrong, empty, like Nathan had never lived there. She'd cleaned too thoroughly, erasing him with pine sol and bleach. The kitchen was dark. She hit the light switch. Everything exactly as she'd left it that morning, dishes drying in the rack. Nathan's coffee mug still on the counter where she couldn't bring herself to wash it. "What are we looking for?" David asked. Miriam went straight to the spice cabinet. Nathan had reorganized it during his last mobile month, insisting on alphabetical order. Except turmeric. She pulled out the jar. He hated turmeric, said it tasted like dirt. The jar was too heavy. She unscrewed the lid. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was a glass vial filled with white powder. A label in Nathan's handwriting, Margaret's Piece, Compound 18. Footsteps in the hallway. York was coming. "There's more!" David pointed to the back of the cabinet. Another jar cinnamon this time. Inside, a USB drive and a folded paper. Miriam grabbed both, shoving them in her pocket as York appeared in the doorway. His silver hair was perfectly styled despite the rain, his suit immaculate. "30 million, he said without preamble, "for exclusive rights to manufacture. It's not for sale. Everything's for sale." York stepped into the apartment uninvited. "It's just a matter of price." Nathan wanted it free, available to everyone. Noble, naive. York moved closer. "Do you know what it costs to bring a drug to market? FDA trials, manufacturing standards, distribution networks. Your husband's formula is useless without infrastructure." Miriam's phone rang. "Lucas, don't answer that," York said. She answered anyway, putting it on speaker. "Miriam," Lucas's voice was raw. "James told me something about his therapy sessions, about why he wanted to die. Lucas, he found out about the patents 6 months ago. A lawyer contacted him, said Nathan Holt left him a fortune. He thought it was a scam until he researched. Found out about what my father did." York stepped closer, interested now. "Your father sold his house." Miriam said, "To pay for James's treatment." "No." Lucas's voice cracked. "My father sold his house to Harrison York." The kitchen seemed to tilt. York's expression didn't change, but his hand moved to his jacket pocket. "Dad needed quick cash." Lucas continued. "York offered 20 cents on the dollar. Dad took it, used the money for James's treatment, but it wasn't enough. Then suddenly, mysteriously, the bills were paid. Anonymous benefactor. Nathan," Miriam whispered. "Nathan. Who knew because Margaret told him? Margaret, who knew because she was on the hospital board. It's all connected. Miriam, every piece." York pulled out his phone, started typing. "But here's what James couldn't live with." Lucas's voice dropped. "York bought my father's house for $40,000, flipped it 3 months later for $200,000. The profit was 3,000 would have covered the rest of James's treatment. York knew this, knew a child was dying, chose profit. York's fingers stopped moving on his phone. "That's business," York said, loud enough for Lucas to hear. "I didn't cause the child's illness." "No," Lucas replied through the speaker. "You just profited from it, like you're trying to profit now from Nathan's compound. The compound that could help millions," York countered. "But only with proper development, manufacturing, distribution." Eleanor's voice cut in when she joined the call. "Whitmore Industries could manufacture it. We have the facilities, the networks, everything except the formula." Miriam looked at the vial in her hand, then at the USB drive in her pocket. Nathan had thought of everything. "The formula's incomplete," she said suddenly, understanding flooding through her. "Everyone, York, David." Lucas on the phone went silent. She pulled out the folded paper from the cinnamon jar. Nathan's handwriting, shaky but clear. "The compound requires 3 components. One is in the vial, one is on the USB. The third is with James Brenner, encoded in the patent transfer documents. Only together do they work. Separation ensures cooperation." York's face went pale. "He made it impossible to steal." "He made it necessary to share," Miriam corrected. Her phone buzzed. Text from James. "Found something in the patent papers. Chemical formula hidden in the legal language. Dad says it's part of something bigger." Another text from Dr. Mitchell. "At hospital with Harlan. He's asking for you. Says Margaret left something in his grandfather's workbench. Something about the third component." The threads were coming together. Nathan, Margaret, Lucas's father, Harlan's grandfather, all connected across decades, each holding a piece of the solution. "York," Miriam said. "You have a choice. Same one you had with Lucas's father. Profit or people. False dichotomy. Profit serves people, creates jobs, funds research. Creates inequality, breeds desperation." She held up the vial. "This compound could sell for thousands per dose, or it could cost pennies to manufacture, available to everyone. You're talking about destroying billions in potential value. I'm talking about creating invaluable dignity." She moved to the window, looked out at the parking lot. More cars arriving, workers from the factory, following the story through texts and calls. Nathan died knowing Margaret had 7 clear days because of this. 7 days to say goodbye properly. Every dying person deserves that chance. York moved toward her. David stepped between them. "Don't," David said quietly. "My grandmother has security footage uploading to the cloud. This entire conversation, your confession about the house flip." York froze. "It's 12:07, Eleanor said through the phone. "The bank documents are processing. James owns the patents. The workers own shares through the trust. Dad's stable. Lucas is with Janet, and James' first time in 5 years. Everything's in place except a crash from the garage below. Breaking glass. Someone's in Nathan's workshop," David said. Looking out the window, Miriam saw them 3 figures in dark clothes, moving through the garage, professional, efficient, heading for the workshop. "Corporate espionage, York said, and for the first time he looked genuinely surprised. "Not my people." Another crash. Then voiced, angry. The intruders had found the false panel Nathan mentioned, found it empty because the compound was here, in the kitchen. "They'll come up here next," David said. Miriam looked at the vial, the USB, the formula. 3 parts of a whole, separated. They were useless. Together, they could change how people died, or they could make someone very rich. "The workbench," she said suddenly. "Margaret left something in Harlan's grandfather's workbench, the real third component." "That's at the factory," Lucas said through the phone. 20 minutes from you." The intruders were leaving the garage, heading for the building entrance. They'd seen the lights in her apartment. "We need to go," David said. "Where?" York demanded. "Those men, whoever sent them, they'll follow." Miriam made a decision. She handed York the vial. "What are you?" "You hold one part. James has another. I have the third." She pocketed the USB. "None of us can profit alone. All of us can help together." Footsteps on the stairs, running, multiple people. "The factory," she said. "Everyone to the factory? That's where this started. That's where it ends." She headed for the door, then stopped, turned back to the kitchen counter, picked up Nathan's coffee mug, the one she couldn't wash, still containing the dregs of his last cup. At the bottom of the mug, stuck to the ceramic with dried coffee, was a small key, the key to Harlan's grandfather's workbench. The key's metal teeth bit into Miriam's palm as footsteps pounded up the stairwell. David grabbed her arm, pulled her toward the apartment's back exit, the fire escape Nathan had insisted on testing monthly. Even after the diagnosis. "Move!" David hissed. They burst through the door as the intruders reached the main entrance. Rain slapped against Miriam's face, cold and sharp. The fire escape's metal grating was slick, treacherous. Her orthopedic shoes had no grip. "Can you make it?" David asked. She thought of Nathan, dragging himself to the kitchen those last weeks, determined to cook despite hands that couldn't hold a spatula. Yes. They descended, metal clanging with each step. Above them, her apartment door splintered. Voices shouted, not English, Russian Mandarin. She couldn't tell over the rain. York waited at the bottom, surprisingly agile for his age. "My car, now!" They piled into the Mercedes, Miriam in back, David riding shotgun. York pulled out before doors were fully closed, tires spinning on wet asphalt. "Who are they?" Miriam demanded. "Competition." York checked mirrors, executed a perfect J-turn. Zenith Pharmaceutical, probably, or Meridian Medical. The compound rumors have been circulating for months. How did they? Margaret Whitmore. York accelerated through a yellow light. She wasn't subtle about her final day's clarity. Medical professionals talk. Word spreads. A fortune waiting in a janitor's apartment. Miriam's phone rang. "Eleanor." "Where are you?" Eleanor's voice was tight. The factories surrounded. 3 black SUVs. Security guards reported armed individuals. Corporate mercenaries. York's hands tightened on the wheel. "This is bigger than I thought." "Dad's being discharged," Eleanor continued. "Against medical advice, but he insists. Says he needs to be at the factory. Something about completing the circle." Through the phone, Miriam heard Harlan's voice, weak but determined. "My grandfather's debt, Nathan's father's loyalty, it ends tonight." "We're 10 minutes out," Miriam said. "Tell the workers to stay inside. Lock all doors." "Too late. Jim Paulson already confronted them." They backed off, but haven't left. The Mercedes engine roared as York pushed it harder. The speedometer climbed past 80 on city streets. David gripped the door handle, knuckles white. "There's something else," Eleanor said. "Lucas found something in the patent documents, not just the chemical formula. Instructions. Nathan embedded instructions for mass production, scale quantities, equipment specifications, everything needed to manufacture thousands of doses." "He planned for this," Miriam whispered. "He planned for everything except armed extraction teams," York corrected, swerving around a delivery truck. Miriam pulled out the USB drive. Such a small thing to cause such chaos. She thought of Nathan in those final days, mind still sharp while his body failed, planning contingencies within contingencies. "The workbench, Chillet," she said. "We need to get to the workbench. First, we need to get past the mercenaries," York said. Her phone buzzed. Text from James Brenner. "I'm here at the factory with Mom and Dad." Another text. "I have something to say." The factory appeared ahead, lit up like a beacon. The parking lot was full, not just workers, but families, media vans, police cars with lights flashing. The 3 black SUVs Eleanor mentioned were parked strategically, blocking main entrances. "They can't move with this many witnesses," David observed. "They don't need to." York pulled into a handicapped spot. "They just need to wait. Eventually, everyone leaves. Then they take what they want." They got out into the rain. Miriam saw faces in the factory windows, workers watching, waiting. Jim Paulson stood by the loading dock, arms crossed, flanked by a dozen men from the floor. The Hendersons were there, even the children, wrapped in raincoats. "Mrs. Holt," Maria Santos called out, running over with an umbrella. "Mr. Whitmore's inside. He says you have the key." Miriam held it up. Such a small thing, smaller than the vial York still carried. But in her mind, she saw Nathan's father using this key decades ago, locking away his tools each night, building America one precision part at a time. They pushed through the crowd. Inside, the factory floor was packed. Someone had set up speakers. Eleanor stood at a makeshift podium, Lucas beside her. James was there, too thin, pale a hill, but standing. Janet held his arm. First time she'd touched Lucas's world in 5 years. Harlan sat in a wheelchair near his grandfather's workbench. An oxygen tube ran under his nose. His skin was gray, but his eyes were sharp. "Miriam?" he said. "The key." She approached the workbench. It hadn't been touched in decades, Harry Whitmore's tools still arranged precisely, covered in dust, but intact. The lock was small, brass, set into the bench's side drawer. The key slid in smooth. 70 years of waiting, and the lock turned without resistance. Inside the drawer, another vial, this one filled with blue liquid, a notebook in Harry Whitmore's handwriting, and a photograph, young Harry in uniform, standing next to Jonas Holt. Both men smiling despite bandages, despite war, despite everything. "Read it," Harlan said. Miriam opened the notebook. Harry's writing was precise, mechanical. "Jonas Holt saved my life twice, once in France, pulling me from burning metal, once in Ohio, showing me that precision isn't about perfection, but about consistency." His son, Nathan, inherited both traits, the courage to act and the patience to perfect. "This compound is my contribution, the preservative that prevents degradation. Developed in secret, tested on myself during the cancer that killed me. It works, but only with the other components. Jonas knew, Nathan knew, now you know." She looked at the blue liquid. 3 parts, white powder. Digital formula, blue preservative, separate. They were incomplete. Together, they offer dignity," James spoke up, his voice carrying despite its softness. "I've been reading Nathan's notes. He didn't just create a pain medication. He created a way for people to choose how they say goodbye." Lucas moved toward his son, stopped, uncertain. James nodded. Permission granted. Father stood next to son, not touching, but closer than they'd been in years. "The mercenaries," someone called out. "They're moving." Through the windows, the black SUVs were repositioning, tightening their perimeter. "Let them come," Harrison York said. Surprising everyone. He pulled out his phone, started recording. "This is Harrison York, Corbin Capital. I'm witnessing the voluntary transfer of intellectual property from the estate of Nathan Holt to Whitmore Industries, with specific provisions for public benefit manufacturing. He looked directly at the camera. Any attempt to steal or suppress this compound will be met with full legal response from Corbin Capital's resources. Additionally, he paused, seemed to wrestle with something internal. Additionally, Corbin Capital pledges $10 million in development funds. With no equity stake required, the room went silent. Why? Lucas asked. York lowered the phone. Because I'm 73 years old. Because I've made enough money to buy anything except what matters. Because watching James Brenner sign those papers while believing his survival cost too much. His voice caught. Some things shouldn't have a price. Miriam mixed the three components in a clean beaker from the factory floor. White powder dissolved into blue liquid. The USB formula provided exact proportions. The mixture turned clear, transparent as water, as tears, as truth. Margaret took this, Harlan said quietly. 7 days of clarity. She used them to arrange everything, every piece of this moment. Not everything, James said. She couldn't arrange forgiveness. That has to be chosen. He turned to his father. The entire factory watched. I'm not ready to forgive, James said. But I'm ready to try. That has to be enough for now. Lucas nodded, tears running unchecked down his face. Eleanor took the microphone. Whitmore Industries will manufacture to this compound at cost. No profit, no patents beyond what's needed to prevent pharmaceutical exploitation. Nathan and Margaret's gift to the world. The black SUVs began pulling away. Without exclusive rights, the compound was worthless to them. Let the whole world have it, no competitive advantage in compassion. There's more, Rebecca Sterling announced, holding up a tablet. The Morrison contract isn't just renewing, they're doubling it. David Morrison says any company brave enough to choose humanity over profit deserves partnership. The workers erupted in cheers. Jim Paulson lifted Miriam off her feet again, spinning her despite her protests. The Hendersons' children ran through the crowd, laughing. Even Agnes Chen smiled, leaning on her walker. But Miriam walked back to the workbench, ran her fingers over Harry Whitmore's tools. She thought of connections spanning decades. Jonas pulling Harry from flames, Harry sponsoring Jonas's immigration, Nathan saving James with retirement funds, Margaret orchestrating revelation from her deathbed. The numbers never lie, Lucas said, appearing beside her. But neither does love. Nathan would have liked that, Miriam said. Would have. She touched Nathan's coffee mug, still in her pocket. He's gone. Mr. Brenner. This. She gestured to the crowd. The compound, the connected pieces. This is his echo. Pshitabasa. Beautiful, necessary, but still an echo. Echoes can be enough, Eleanor said. Joining them, Mom's echo brought us all here, forced us to see each other. Through the windows, dawn was breaking. The rain had stopped. Sunlight caught the wet parking lot, turning it into a field of diamonds. What now? James asked. He looked stronger already, like signing those papers had lifted weight from his spine. Now we work, Harlan said from his wheelchair. His color was better, oxygen tube removed. We manufacture. We distribute. We show the world that American business can have conscience and profit both. It won't be easy, York warned. Pharmaceutical companies will challenge us. Regulations will slow us. Market forces assume isolation. Miriam interrupted. We're not isolated anymore. She was right. The crowd in the factory wasn't dispersing. If anything, it was growing. Second shift workers arriving early, first shift staying late. Families bringing food, media setting up permanent cameras. The story was too good to abandon. Janitor saves company. Workers' own means of production. Dying gift changes how we die. Cole Travis approached with a laptop. Legal frameworks uploaded. Anyone can access the formula, but can't patent derivatives. Nathan thought of everything. Not everything, Miriam said. He didn't think I'd have to do this without him. Janet Brenner spoke for the first time. None of us thought we'd be here, but here we are. She stood between her ex-husband and son, not bridging them, but acknowledging both. 5 years of silence breaking, not with words, but presence. "The compound needs a name," someone called out. "For FDA filing." Everyone looked at Miriam. She thought of Nathan's last coherent words, whispered through morphine haze, "Make it matter, Mary." "Grace," she said. "We'll call it Grace." Harlan stood from his wheelchair, shaky but determined. "All in favor of appointing Miriam Holt as Chief Financial Officer." Every hand rose, even York's. "All in favor of Lucas Brenner remaining as Chief Risk Officer." Again, unanimous. "All in favor of restructuring Whitmore Industries as a public benefit corporation." The vote was unanimous. But more than that, it was eager. Workers who'd never owned anything suddenly owned pieces of something meaningful. Eleanor took it over, organizing committees, assigning tasks. Lucas started calculating production costs, James beside him offering suggestions. Janet watched them work, something like peace on her face. But Miriam walked outside, into the morning sun. The parking lot was full, but quiet. Everyone inside working. She found a bench, the one where she used to eat lunch alone, reading Nathan's physics journals. She pulled out his final letter, the one she'd been carrying but hadn't read. "Miri, if you're reading this, then everything worked, not the compound that was always secondary. What worked was connection. You spoke up. They listened. The invisible became visible. I'm sorry I couldn't stay to see it, but energy is never destroyed, only transformed. My body failed, but my work continues. Through you, through them, through every person who chooses courage over comfort. The patents were never about money. They were about forcing people to see each other. James needed to know his survival mattered. Lucas needed to forgive himself. Harlan needed to release control. You needed to use your voice. Margaret knew all this. We spent her last clear days planning, calculating probabilities, like physics problems. She saw the patterns I missed, that isolation is entropy, but connection is energy. I love you, present tense. Death doesn't change that. It only transforms it. Make it matter. Nathan, P.S. Check the kitchen cabinet again. Behind the flour, one more surprise. Miriam smiled through tears. Of course there was more. With Nathan, there was always one more level, one more connection. She stood ready to go back inside, to work, to build, to transform grief into grace. The factory hummed with purpose, not just machines, but voices, planning, creating, connecting. Through the windows, she could see them all. Lucas and James bent over calculations. Eleanor organizing, Harlan teaching young workers about precision. York on the phone arranging logistics. The sun climbed higher, burning off the last of the rain. The wet world sparkled. Miriam walked back inside, ready to check behind the flour, ready for whatever Nathan had hidden there, ready to be CEO of a company that chose humanity over profit, ready to honor the dead by serving the living. The compound Grace would help millions die with dignity. But more than that, the process of creating it had helped dozens remember how to live with purpose. Nathan was right. Energy is never destroyed. Love transforms but doesn't end. And sometimes the smallest voice in the room carries the truth that saves everyone. She thought of him one more time, Nathan in his wheelchair, writing equations, turning suffering into solution. Then she let the memory settle into her bones, becoming not weight, but foundation. There was work to do, grace to manufacture, lives to change. The numbers never lie. Neither does love. Both together could transform the world. Behind the flower in Miriam's kitchen cabinet was a single photograph, Nathan and Margaret sitting together in the hospital courtyard, both in wheelchairs, both dying, both smiling. On the back, in Nathan's shaking hand, "We knew you would all save each other." They had known. Two dying souls had seen what the living couldn't, that Whitmore Industries wasn't failing from debt, but from isolation. That Lucas's fear was everyone's fear. That Miriam's silence was everyone's silence. That connection requires the courage to be seen in our brokenness. Grace launched 6 months later. The first batch went to Cleveland Psychiatric, where James Brenner had learned to forgive his father. The second to the hospice where Margaret died. Within a year, every hospital in America could offer dying patients clarity instead of fog. But the real product wasn't the compound. It was the proof that business could serve humanity, that workers could own their labor, that truth spoken softly could echo louder than lies shouted from boardrooms. Miriam kept Nathan's coffee mug on her CFO desk, unwashed, a reminder that love persists in the smallest details, that grace comes from seeing the invisible, and that sometimes salvation arrives pushing a cleaning cart. Disclaimer: this story is a work of fiction created solely for entertainment purposes. It does not condone, encourage, or promote any form of violence or harmful behavior. All characters and events are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. The medical and chemical elements described are fictional and should not be considered factual or used for any real-world application. This narrative aims to explore themes of human connection, redemption, and compassion through imaginary circumstances.